Okay, Jeff, here we are. We're on the other side of 2024's Global Summit. So our job is we're supposed to talk about the key insights that happened, key impact, and also give an overview of what happened during these 10 days, and in particular what happened on the final 3 days. So I think where we need to start is we need to lay some context for everybody that there was a couple hundred people from 20 different nations or so from around the world that came, many more online, but that we were in person together. What else do we want to say about it? We, as giving context, we've been
doing them since 1990.
Since 1990, so this has been going on for a while, been building.
Next year would be our 35th, except we didn't do the COVID ones, but we should count them anyway.
So why should we count them
because
anyway?
Then it'll be our 35th.
So because we want it to be our 35th, then we should count them anyway, even though we didn't have them?
Well, we Zoomed one, remember, kind of.
Well, we did Zoom
and we were thinking constructively on the other one, so I count them. So next time's our 35th.
I love it. So, but the main fact is we've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's key, and I'm sure this will come up as we talk about it, but our network of churches does all of the transportation, all of the hosting of everyone in their homes, has all these top leaders from around the world in their homes, spends time with their children, spend times over food, spend time with them in the evenings. It's truly a family atmosphere that we intentionally create.
Well, yeah, we were sharing and reflecting on this last night in our house church, and I remembered in the past when you used to host situations like this for Ag Leader, when you were leading it, and bring everybody together for a week and have to house them in hotels and everything.
And all
with
the
that.
food and hotel costs.
And a lot of the internationals covered their own expense, getting here as well this time. So, it's like we've got a small staff of 20, but because it's church-based, when we need 300 participating, we've got 300 participating.
Yeah.
And if we added it up according to in the past, it probably was $250,000 by just having everybody in their homes, supplying all the food, the transportation, their commitment to get here at their own expense.
Yep.
So we can do these kinds of things even financially because of the church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think part of what we want to do now then is that sets a brief scope for someone who needs to know what this event is about, how long it's been going on. But let's kind of go through the first days. The first days, everyone is coming from their networks, and they're spending intentional time working on strategy. What we call their master strategy.
You said the first days?
The first days. So first 7 days is they're working on their master strategy. They're talking about implementation. Let's spend just a couple minutes talking about the first 7 days.
Well, I think the great improvement this time is what you had designed that we started with the India groups, and that is that build coaches are assigned to everyone. So I think of it as in those first few days, they're all working on their master strategies, but we've got a coach, on each one, and that makes the time just really customized. It makes it really work for their situations because we've got really capable coaches working with them. And they're outside of their environment, so there's no distractions because these guys lead sometimes tens of thousands of churches. There's no distraction. They're top leaders. We got to coach with them, and they just got a few days to work on their master strategies. That's a significant thing.
Yeah, and we used to do workshops and teaching courses, and we've moved away from most of that and gone right into what you're talking about. There was it just a specific, customizable, specific to their situation. Just taking their situation and talking about the scale and the depth that can be put into each of their situation with the whole developmental system that we have. So then let's now jump to the final 3 days, which is a Wednesday and a Thursday and a Friday. Let's jump through and give just the high points of maybe impact, maybe things we learned, maybe impact that we saw.
Let me add one thing in before that. So we got this
for the coaches you're talking about?
No. Before we get to those 3 days.
Oh, okay. All right.
And that is that we got the coaches and they're doing it intensely. Then they got a couple more days the second week. But packed right into there is the internationals visiting our clusters and visiting our individual churches.
Yep.
Because that's the heart of this thing.
Yeah. And
maybe you were going to discuss that later.
No, I actually had forgotten about that, to be honest. But we
can switch. I can lead if that's going to work. If that's going to work better.
Well,
no, but I think that's, you take the coaching and then you take the dynamite element of being in people's homes, visiting our churches, in the clusters.
Yeah. We should say a word about that now that you've brought that up and led us so well. We intentionally set up that they would experience each part of a complex network.
Yep.
And so, like you said, the smallest form is the individual family, but then in the homes, but then the next piece is the church as family. The house
churches, yeah.
Yeah, the individual, which is a family of families. So, and they experienced that on Sunday evening. Then at some point during the weekend or even a weeknight, we said the cluster, which is a collection of churches put together for different reasons, for strategy reasons, for affinity reasons, for other reasons. Then either the leaders came together of that cluster or the cluster of churches came together. Mm-hmm. And then we also had our network time. So you see and then on Monday we had our elders meet with them, and we had our apostolic team. And so you saw all of the 5 key component pieces: the individual families, the family of families, the churches, the clusters, the hub, the elders, the apostolic team. I guess that's 6. You see all those component pieces in action.
Yeah, and just for our audience, it isn't perfectly symmetrical, but our framework is that a cluster is made up of at least 3 house churches. And then there's a senior elder over each of those clusters. Then there's an elder, deacon, or leading woman in each individual church. So for them to be able to experience that whole range, like you were saying, is a vital part. And when they go back, as soon as we land, on our next trip that's coming up in a couple weeks, as soon as we land into their situations, we're going to, the first question is going to be, how's so-and-so doing, my host, and the family that
hosted
them. Yeah. And then, and then gifts that they want to send back, which I won't take because I never check anything, but I just send them to you.
I take back about 50% of them.
Yeah.
It's hard to check a bag when you travel to so many spots. But the intentionality of I think part of what we're trying to say, Jeff, right, is there's a difference between attending a workshop versus being in someone's home and experiencing it, all those component pieces of networks of churches, experiencing networks of churches versus just hearing about it in a workshop is a very different thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a vast improvement that we've got coaches assigned that can help customize their plan, and even when they do need specific training. We had we had some training laid out in that first week with the cloud and kind of some development. But basically, they get any training they need depending upon where they're at and where their master plan is at through coach. And it makes the whole time more relaxed, more enjoyable, less performance oriented. Great improvement.
Yeah. So now let's jump to Wednesday.
Are you sure you haven't forgotten anything else?
Let me check. Nope, I haven't forgotten anything. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On the Wednesday afternoon, we talked about two things. So let's dive in just to those things. We talked about the paradigm S-curves, paradigm progress for gospel progress was the name of one of the papers. And then we talked about our global strategy system. Mm-hmm. So what would you highlight? What did you learn? What did you feel other people learned? What got more rooted? Any of those, what would you highlight about those two sessions if people weren't able to see them, people weren't there?
Yeah, you've got it in the introduction to your paper, so we don't need to tell it too far here, but they need to know you actually presented one of two global dialogues.
Yeah.
So you're doing a set of global dialogue papers. I'm doing this new set of white papers, and so you presented the first one of those, and in the introduction, and you're dealing with S-curves.
Yeah.
Paradigm curves. And you told the story at the beginning, but the idea that 10 years ago or so, when I got off an airplane and met you and Lee at the airport, not at a restaurant near the airport, and laid out the paradigm curves, I was so excited about them coming in three and just really giving the picture of this. And the story is you didn't have a clue what I was talking about, and evidently didn't for a period of time until finally it came alive in South Korea last year when you and I were with some of the key leaders there.
I would say, Jeff, it wasn't that I didn't have any clue, because I would just correct it and say I had only a clue. There's a difference there.
Probably not right at that time. Yeah, I think you were pretty.
I was barking up the wrong tree there.
You're pretty clueless at that.
Well, you were recruiting me to be part of it, so you saw something.
Yeah. Actually, is the ironic thing. That was a big step in the recruiting process to get you to join us for future leadership.
Do you believe it? It's actually more than it's more like 15 years.
Gee.
Than 10. So.
But your explanation, I thought your paper was terrific. I thought you, by taking each one of those three S-curves, and the first one being for the theological education, the second one, the net church networks, and now the third one being the building of benefactors, and but taking those, isolating them out the way that you did, and then just walking everybody through. I'm sure that was a much clearer explanation than what I gave you 15 years earlier. So it was actually really fun to see you do that. And I think people really began to get their hands around it a lot more.
In the piece too, we had Walter Kaiser recorded, and you interviewed him. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But one of the things that he had talked about was that in his way he does the story, or the meta narrative, the continuity through the Old and New Testament, he talks about if you get to these mountain peaks, then you can see the whole a lot clearer. And just now I was just thinking that, listening to you, I was thinking part of that 15 years with the S curves, you're as time moves on, you get a larger and larger view of what's happening in the world. And as you reach a certain point of seeing that, the view of the world, then the S curves became relevant. Mm-hmm. And before then, you can't quite see enough that you don't know what to do with the S curves. You think they're just an academic thing. You think they're just a you don't know where to place them. They're not useful to you but now I would just say they help you understand the past and they help you discern the future, which is the subtitle of the paper. So those that are truly trying to be paradigm pioneers and really get a set of patterns that's patterned after X to move forward in a world, you have to deal with the S curves. You have to deal with it because they just give you a guiding light.
And they also help you catalog reactions. In other words, as at the beginning of that S curve, you're solving a few paradigm problems, and then you solve problems and work your way up. But right away, you see, now who are the pioneers, and who are the people that are coming to us out of the establishment? They just want to use some materials. They're going to appear here.
Yeah.
And until you get way up.
They might be early adopters. They might be late adopters, but they're definitely not pioneers.
And if we're only looking for pioneers and not, it also helps us to categorize requests of networks, because we don't want to write networks off because they're not ready to jump in with both feet and really pioneer. And we've got to solve a few more problems before it will work for the early adopters or the majority anyway.
Yeah.
So they serve so many purposes.
So we started the whole off with that. What about strategies? We have a global strategy system. You first started and laid out grand strategy for shaping Christendom, shaping the set of patterns of Christianity that's emerging in the days in which we live. But then we also talked about master strategies for civilization, for the globe. We talked about master strategies for civilization. Then we talked about master strategies for each partner, which is which each partner started with. Then we talked about strategies for individual churches and for individuals themselves and families. So all the way from a global grand strategy, all the way down to what did we learn? Again, same question I think on all of these. What impacts did we see? What did we see other people learning?
And was this a session that we went ahead and shared our chart that is
yes,
like the 24 key leaders and then the 6?
No one else knows what we're talking about, but it's a circular chart in a circle, and it's got seats at a table, so to speak, a little
like a round table,
but there's seats on there, and there's different categories of those seats, which make up different teams, but all together, it's one team. Mm-hmm. But they each play roles on the team, but collectively it's a complex team.
Yeah, I think I can't
based
really
all over the world too.
Yeah, I can't really think of that on this one. Some of the others I did, but on this, I don't think I really learned anything. I think that I saw it happen again and again and again during this conference, which makes it unique. And that is because we'd spent 5 weeks on the other side of 4 years talking about the next 30 years.
Yeah, in December, we spent all of December and first week of January together on the heels of really 4 years of leadership conversations. It's been one conversation, but we came to so much clarity.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of background.
And wiped everything else out to concentrate during that time. And so now we sort of have an audience for these things. We have an audience for this global strategy and them understanding it. And I think the real objective that we had, at least as you laid it out, the objective is that they would understand our grand strategy better and understand that they need to design their master strategy so it fits. And therefore, we've got, again, a global network, a global family that has some real structure. So I think by identifying in that, some of them are global resource teams because they're partners that have moved along so far, they can, really help others set up the whole thing, or partner resource teams that are really able to help a next door partner, but be full partners themselves. But just seeing that whole thing laid out, it works. I mean, people were, especially after going through the coaching and getting some shape to the master strategies before that, I think I heard again and again the idea of some of our international partners just feeling really empowered because besides their own network, they have a growing role in making this thing happen, as a movement. Since we didn't talk about it, but really for the next 5 years, this idea of the emerging Christendom and shaping that emerging Christendom as a marked theme on everything we presented. But I think that by seeing the global team at different levels and the master strategies and the effort to coordinate them, it was really empowering to a lot of our partners, and feeling like, well, we are ready for the next phase of this.
Yeah, one of the things I heard, Jeff, was how individuals themselves felt like they could connect themselves to the larger work that's happening regionally in their civilization and globally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we're so inundated in the Christian world with the individualistic, what does it mean to be a Christian or a Christian life? What does it mean for you as an individual Christian to be involved with Jesus? That we don't know how to connect that to what God is doing around the world, right? And there's a big gap. Of course, there's a big gap between a person individually and what the Holy Spirit has been doing and is doing around the world. But I think I heard quite a few people talk to me afterwards, and all their comments and questions were all surrounding that, building that bridge of their individual life, their family's life, all the way to the church, to a network, to a civilization, to the globe. I think some bridges were built there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do too.
And I think every Christian ultimately desires to be part of something bigger than themselves, part of what God's doing around the world.
Yeah. I think we accomplished that.
Yeah.
In a very significant way, especially with partners in the Global South.
Yeah.
Because that with the North, Western Christianity and significant decline in this massive growth of the church in the Global South, I think it's one issue was getting rid of colonialism, but another issue is building genuine partnerships.
Yeah.
And realizing that enormous contribution is going to come from these Global South partners. And that's where the shape of the next Christendom will come from. And so we made significant inroads into that.
Yeah. So Global South, we got to say, what's Global South? Some people may not, we use that term pretty regularly.
Yeah. Some are starting to use the majority world, but I don't buy it. I think Global South is still, the Global South basically is the span of the Southern Hemisphere that goes all the way from Latin America across Africa to India and Asia. But China is considered in the Global South because of how it dips into Asia, even though it really isn't in a way. But the Global South, in North America, we lost another 10 million out of our churches in the last decade. And in France, you saw those guys were there, 35,000 to 38,000 towns of villages don't even have an evangelical witness. Mm-hmm. So it's post-Christian and very much becoming post-Christian in the U.S. But in the last, since 1970, probably 800 million, some say as much as 1.2 billion, came to Christ outside the Western system. So it's exploding in these large-scale church planting movements, and so some of them are tangled with the Western denominations. Most of them are relatively like Acts, without understanding where to go, next.
Yeah.
And so that's the significance to a number of them, is that not only are they included, but they're central. And here's how to strategize together. And some people are just still worried about the colonialization and still fighting those old battles, but that's by us building our partnerships directly with nationals all over the world, all over the global South. It's natural for us to help them build significant partnerships. I think that set the tone.
Yeah, but building those partnerships over all these years with the global South leaders is what we see in Acts still exists today. Mm-hmm. It still is happening today. That's what's so exciting about it. And so I think people can see that when they hear that too, and they're not only connecting themselves, their individual lives, to something bigger, just because it's bigger. They feel they're connecting themselves to something like the Book of Acts that's happening today.
Yeah,
that there is a difference between that too.
Yeah,
you can connect yourself to something big.
And the next emerging Christendom is going to emerge out of the global South and what's built. And that's why I think you and I said, okay, now let's look at the next 30 years, because there will be a next 30 years. And we've got, in the biggest countries, in the world, we've got a large percentage of church planting movements, house church movements, and ready to go. And now it's kind of like we kind of help them put things in place, because they're going to have to lead the emerging next Christendom.
Okay, so let's move on. The next day, we showed a recorded video of Walter Kaiser. So we need to give people an understanding of why we did that. So Walter Kaiser was who is he? Why is he? You had an hour and 45-minute conversation with him and a leader from Columbia University. And we talked to, and I listened to it many, many times, and then put it down to like 17 minutes and just took snippets out and showed people the highlights. But why did we show people that? Why was it? What did we learn from him? And why and in some ways, how are we standing on the shoulders of what he mentored us in since the 1970s?
Yeah, well, part of it fit beautifully with my white paper, which would be delivered the next day on Friday. In looking at how we got where we're at right now, and some of the journey and some of the story, because the one of the exciting things was at this conference was we've completed mastering the scriptures, all the Pauline 3 clusters of letters, and in a completely unique design of author's intent, literary design, biblical theology, and Kaiser was at the foundation of that. Walter Kaiser, when I met him, was in 1976, when he was head of the Old Testament department at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. And he mentored me for over a 30-year period, and I forgot about it. But people, when we were reconstructing this, they said Kaiser was also here at our conference and delivered the keynote.
Oh, he delivered that paper.
Yeah. Well, he delivered a paper down in that single intent paper years earlier, like 1994 or something like that.
Okay.
But in 2012, I believe it was, he was here and gave a keynote. And I completely forgot
I didn't know that.
So that extends our time from 1976 to 2012 when he was involved with us. And but specifically, he later became president of Gordon Conwell Seminary. So everything from the single intent of Scripture in his writings to Old Testament theology and biblical theology becoming a framework, to introducing me to Edward Farley and and on his desk drew a chart, on a sheet on his desk drew a chart of the New Theological Encyclopedia, and besides that, opened the door for many experiences for me, being invited to the Inerrancy Summit. I never said the significance of that, but the Inerrancy Summits and the Hermeneutic Summits, they only had 100 invites. 50 were scholars that were shaping those conversations. The other 50 were observants. And he got me into both of those. And then on top of that, besides coming to our conferences and giving me significant time every year, then he helped accomplish our D-Min before we were accredited, being under the umbrella of Gordon Conwell.
Yeah.
Named it from church-based to global church-based theological education, and volunteered to be one of the faculty of the school that would help make contributions to that D-Min. So just that whole journey led us to say, let's since my paper is also documenting the development of our resources over actually a 50-year period from the very first diagram, that gave us a chance for other people to meet him and experience him before he's 90 years old.
Yeah, he's 90 years old. He's 90 years old. He gets on the video and he basically says, I don't have a lot of time because I've got a lot of things I'm doing.
He's still writing.
And he's still writing. He's got 90 some books he's written.
Yeah.
And you said to him, Walt, I first talked to you almost 50 years ago and you didn't have time, and it's still the same. That was a comical way to begin,
yeah. But thanks for the time.
But thanks for the time. And he said, and he's so gracious. But I think the other part that we have to peer people into, and that is help them understand. You did not go to TEDS. You were not a student, and you weren't a student at any of the seminaries or places that he was at. But you walked down the hallways and would knocked on his door in particular because you sought him out, and he gave you time. Mm-hmm. And then you end up setting appointments with him regularly. And then you walk out with all this information. You walk out with all these books. You walk out with manuscripts before their books. And the students who are paying for all for a tuition, which is the whole system, are quite jealous of you and saying to you, how can you get all this time and information and I'm paying and you aren't paying anything? You're just showing up on campus, just walking around. And so but he gave you time, and he consistently gave you time along with a couple other.
Yeah, he remembers
those early days. You were 20 some years old.
When I first walked in his office and or knocked on his door and he let me in, which was the first mistake. I would have been, I was 24 at that point. Yeah, I had, the person who had mentored me said, if you're really going to build this apprenticeship idea, this is 1974, where he'd poured a lot into me, last 2 years of high school and first 2 years, out. And then Nancy and I came with him to start the church here. And then he decided to go back to Dallas and start a church down there and use the seminary. Well, he said, you got to get advisors if you're going to build this thing the way you want. And they got to be key seminary professors that are carrying the conversation in their area. So I think at one time I had close to 20 advisors drawn from 5 of our 8, what I considered 8 major theological schools at that time. And but Ted Ward and Walt Kaiser are the ones who, in fact, on the back of the leadership courses, I talk about the assistance of Walt Kaiser and Ted Ward in helping contribute it, because they both gave us over 30 years. They came down here at their own expense and came to our conferences and did papers and all sorts of things. So on the tape, Kaiser does a humorous job of saying, who is this guy the first time? He says, I let him in. I think that God wanted me to, but I couldn't figure out who he was or what he wanted, and so we wanted people to, you've had the passion to say there's 40 to 50 years of roots here, and you're leading that next generation. So the first generation has got to understand the roots. So this is part of that. But I think documenting it, people have heard the stories, but hearing Kaiser humorously at times talk about how this kind of relationship unfolded, I think made it real for people.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I can be a little hyperbolic, and they probably thought, maybe he saw Kaiser twice, but no, Kaiser said, I paid the price for this.
No, he clearly paid the price for it, and you can see that in the video. It is, to hear it from him, he's 90 years old, he remembers it very well.
Yeah.
It impacted him, and clearly he impacted us. So to have that, to hear that from him was really special. Mm-hmm. I think time for all of us, and to see that we stand on that biblical theology, that the single intent, which led to those conferences about author's intent and literary design with Elliot Johnson, and all the things that it led into. He's kind of he's at the head, really the birth of all that. And so we owe him such a great debt of gratitude. So that leads us perfectly into, then we moved into the Mastering the Scriptures and began to show that to everyone, which Mastering the Scriptures is built on the biblical theology, author's intent, literary design. And as you said earlier, we've been working on that for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so what did we... It's a resource that builds on top of the first principles. But what did we learn in that? What impacted you? What did other people learn? What was gained in that time with everyone? Well,
and actually that decade of producing, another couple years we'll have the whole New Testament, but that decade of producing the Paul's early, middle, later letters, and tucked in there were the producing of the Gospels.
Yeah.
That's actually built on 20 years of the leadership series, because the leadership series 1, leadership series 2, the first course was done in 1990, and I think that all the core courses, the 25 core courses, were completed in about 2010. So these are a lot more developed, but they're built on that whole foundation, which in the paper, remember, we documented all the different writings and rewritings and coming towards this line. But Mastering the Scriptures, you probably need to comment on it more than me, because again, just for the people watching, every Sunday morning, our churches, our house churches, meet in the evenings and in clusters too. But Sunday morning is kind of our leadership development, and in a way, and people are going to be future hosts of churches, and so we, particularly the last 2 years, intensely worked on completing the Pauline series, with you and I dialoguing like this and me doing some presentations, and really devoting a lot of time to getting these things written and worked out in a way that are fully integrated with our networks and allow us to scale the kind of training that's in the leadership series.
Yeah.
And so accomplishing that, and tremendous team. My wife doing, 24/7 editing for the last 2 years. And we got a team that as soon as the book leaves her hands, what James and the team under you have designed is 7 people touch it before it reaches publishing. And so everything converged at the same time. And to give in the conference, these 15 books, and we're attaching the Gospels to Paul's letters, and some of them to the Petrine letters when they come, and some to John. So you read them at the same time. But getting that all done, and getting that, helping people understand that it's the same style, only a lot more work as the first principles, and they're in your hands, was just, I think it blew away a lot of our older partners that know how long this stuff takes and have been waiting to get all of those, and they were published. So in the conference, all of our partners got their complete set.
Yeah.
So it's that was a very significant accomplishment of the whole team to be able to make that happen. And now it's the sky's the limit in terms of with what your team has built with the cloud, and our restructuring of the degrees, so they're really streamlined and designing equip so people can upgrade this stuff, their work, but it's sort of like all the tools are there, and it's symbolic. I mean, we're going to do Old Testament on the other side of this, so there's a lot more work to do, but there's still a sense in, wow, that's the big piece that needs to be in place.
And I think an aspect of this that's really important to talk about too is Walter Kaiser talked about it. You talked about it in 1970, just about the fragmentation. The fragmentation in education of the Christian faith. That is so fragmented. Because I think if Christians may say, well, who needs another book on Ephesians? Go to a Christian bookstore, you find dozens and dozens of books, right? So you first have to start with an understanding that there's a core fragmentation problem. Mm-hmm. And that's what Kaiser really did for you in the 70s, 80s. Those first years especially, I remember in the video, you guys saying that, wow, he just all of a sudden just flipped the world at the Christian education world of which he was in, just upside down. And he just and all of a sudden he made sense of it. And so, and you have to, people can go to a Sunday school for 40 years, like it says in Edward Farley's Fragmentation of Theological Education.
Yeah.
And still not understand how to read for the author's intent of the text. Mm-hmm. And so you're still having to deliver evangelistic messages and preaching sermons every time, even though they've been there for 40 years and not grown deep roots. And so you have to start with, I think, that's what really, one of the things I gained was just, you have to start with that there is a core problem, and you have to be discontent with that some of those core problems. Because otherwise you just view it as a different curriculum, another curriculum that the Christian world needs, which is already full of curriculum all over the place.
Yeah, there's not, there's been a movement towards biblical theology, Old New Testament theology. But single intent of Scripture, which sits at the base of it, hasn't made huge traction. But the theological encyclopedia stays exactly the same. So you go to a seminary, it's like going through a cafeteria. Here's your meats, here's your, here's your salads, here's your meats, here's your desserts, couple sides.
Theological encyclopedia means what a person should learn, in what order should they learn it, right?
Right.
That's a theological encyclopedia.
Yep. And
so you're saying that most theological encyclopedias is a cafeteria.
Yeah.
They go and they pick up systematic theology. They pick up history, Christian history, Bible history. The Schirmachers, the German guy, his whole system of, that's what they pick up.
Yeah.
His whole system of biblical education.
Bible, theology, church history, and practical theology are Schirmacher's 4 divisions, but have fragmented into endless disciplines and
subcategories, specialties, splintered into.
And so what's happened is the church, you don't learn holistically, that you go from, you got to understand a canonical section like the Pentateuch, like the the 5 books of the old early of the law in the Old Testament. Then you got to understand the intent of each book, and you got to understand what the author's single intent was, and then what's the literary design, what are his theological chunks, and then how do you put that together with the next section of Scripture and the next section of Scripture? So you got an Old Testament theology, a New Testament theology. Then how do you apply it to the varied cultural situations? And there's scholarly works for that. I mean, I drew on lots and lots of different authors, but the real driver of biblical theology was Kaiser. And so when I went into his office at about 1976, where he drew out the fact that everything's fragmented and it's got to be put back together, and he put it all in a circle. And I'd just come off of in the apprenticeship of one of the key Dallas Seminary graduates, cramming at an apprenticeship level, 4 years of Dallas into 2.5, Dallas Seminary into 2.5, and really learned tons and tons. But then it was just so fragmented, so disjointed from what we were putting together in missions and what we were, and Ray Stedman and the guys had done with the scribe school and getting it into the church and getting it church based. That when he showed me that, it was like, just like you described, my whole thinking was turned upside down, because I could instantly see, having been working with curriculum and all these advisors and keeping it church based, making it mission driven, I could instantly see that we needed a new theological encyclopedia. Mm-hmm. And we've been building it since that time. We've been building it for 40 years, since longer than that, since that time. And so when we come here to mastering the Scriptures and knowing that the Gospels are situated properly with Paul's early letters, and we're into the Petrine circle now with Peter and associates around him.
Mark and Matthew in there.
Yep. Then, but anyway, to be able to put that set then in front of them, I kind of lost my train of thought. Where I was going with that is, part of it is it's there and it's really going to be usable, and it builds on the first principles, which has reshaped the trajectory of all of these movements. And now they've got this, as a tool. It's sort of like another piece of why we are at an inflection point. Or I like to use the idea of why we're really looking at the next 30 years. And I can say, it's not an arrogant statement, because lots of people contributed, and I didn't invent, I compiled more than anything, that there is not anything like the Mastering the Scriptures, that has a new encyclopedia, that follows biblical theology, that takes you author's intent, literary design, being able to move that into biblical chunks of theology, but then also sets you on a course, but then introduces you to an extensive online available Greco-Roman library to be able to do your own work, and then set you on a journey, just like the first principles, of you producing your own work. There's not anything like that. So to be able to have completed it and have it in the hands, the guys that were there, the ones that have large movements and have been with us for 10, 15 years, they knew what we just handed them, and so they were really excited.
Yeah.
All the way around. It's a milestone situation that is part of laying a platform for what you're doing the next 30 years of your life.
That's right.
But you got to go back and tell a little bit of the story of, because we sit together when we move to writing a new booklet. The people need to know this, I think, that we use our Sunday morning where you and I sit together in session 1 and we discuss it. Our discussion is, then I do a presentation of it. And then we sit together on the other side of it and talk about it. And then we have all of our key leaders or future leaders. We have 150 people or so there. And then they talk at their tables, and then they give input into it. And then the first and last session you're in, then you've got 3 young guys that sit with me in the session 2, 3, 4, and 5, in the middle of it. Again, following that 6th session. And so we've done that now for a long time, but intensely focused, I think, for the last 2 years. And you've talked in many occasions about the significance of that, but why do you think that these things are so significant at this time for us, that process? And because you've jumped right into them. You jumped into teaching, mastering the scriptures, which is very difficult with some of your global team. You've jumped into, you did 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians, 2 Timothy, did a couple of those. Mm-hmm. I think first thing to say would be the understanding what Walter Kaiser and what Ted Ward were really set out wanting to do. And the more you understand what they were setting out to do, I'd never met Walter Kaiser, never met him. I've heard stories, obviously you and you've been mentoring me for 20 years. And so I know the stories. We spent a lot of late evenings together. Mm-hmm. And so I know the stories. But to hear him and to see, and then to see the implementation of it, because sometimes you can talk about it, but not always implement it because of the structure that God has you in. Mm-hmm. But this is in the church, done by the church, done for the church. And so it's I think just knowing that background, first of all, was tremendously helpful for me. But I would say then, as far as what's happened in the last couple of years, and even beyond that, I would say the 10 years, you can make sense of the scriptures. Mm-hmm. You can get clarity on what they are. You can get clarity on your individual role and the collective role that is there. I think so many times I learned the scriptures with pieces, just piece here and a piece here and a piece here. But what mastering the scriptures does is it integrates it. It gives you and that integration then, what Paul is talking about in 1 Corinthians 11:17 to 14:40 is supported by Acts 2:42 through 46, and it's supported by Acts 20:7 through 16. Those aren't all 3 different pieces. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of, and they're not 3 different stories. They're all they actually are supportive of one another, that the church came together and had a meal. They broke bread. They shared the cup afterwards, and they had dialogue throughout. And through that dialogue, through the edification, they celebrated the whole Lord's Supper. So that's one example. Mm-hmm. But
comment on, because I've heard you do it several times, but I think it's significant that especially when we finished 2 Timothy, and then out of everything we'd done in that 10 years, I was unhappy with 1 and 2 Corinthians. It didn't get to the level of the rest. So I went back and taught, all the way through again, afresh, 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians.
Yeah.
But somehow the convergence of that with where we were at, but really reflecting on the right way to think about apostolic authority in 2 Timothy, and then seeing Paul using it all the way through 1 and 2 Corinthians. You said a couple times, I just feel a lot more confident as a result in going into these very large scale and difficult international situations and being able to know exactly what to do with them.
Yeah. You gotta, so the specificity of what you're talking about is, in the context of it, the situation is so important. One is, in the last 5 years, we're moving in and out of a lot of large church situations in the global South. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of different moving pieces. It's complex. You're dealing in a lot of different cultures. Every third day, we're on an airplane and in a different spot, dealing with another situation that's unique, but is large scale. And so, in the meantime, I'm at the age I'm in my 40s, and I'm and as my leadership role is increasing, and so as that happens, you begin to always you're always reflecting and asking yourself, you're always making priority decisions. There's hundreds and hundreds of things to do, but what do you actually do to prioritize the right things? Mm-hmm. And so that's really one of my consistent wrestlings is prioritizing. Okay, so that's the context. Mm-hmm. Then comes 1 Timothy, Titus, 2 Timothy, and then we circle back to 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. And what you see there is you see Paul is telling them, he's not telling them to go make more disciples and then individual disciples, and those individual disciples go make more individual disciples. He's telling them that in a network of churches, there's a social structure. There are leaders. There are moms and dads, if you will, of those complex networks, of those networks of churches that are to be built. The individual churches are, 1 Timothy 3:14 and 15, are to be a family, a household of God, the pillar, the buttress of truth. But the leaders that are given to that network of churches are like Timothy and Titus, and they need to complete the work that's been given to them to move amongst the churches, to equip the saints for works of service. And it's a continuation of that role that complex networks need. And so it gives you you can just see what Paul's talking about. You can connect all the things he's talking about. You can connect Acts 20, 17 through 38 when he's talking to the Ephesian elders, which of course Timothy spent time there. So you can see what Timothy and Titus did. And as a Timothy and Titus myself, that's preparing to be a Paul, if you will, then it still exists. We can still do that work. That's the deposit that was handed off.
So in a way you can
say, from generation to generation.
In a way you can say the fight between evangelicals and Pentecostals are around, are there apostles today?
Yeah.
And of course, we use the term apostolic leadership. And so we're way beyond that fight in the sense
it's not the right question, in a sense. It's not the right...
Yeah, it's kind of like when you see 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus, but particularly 2 Timothy, and then you circle back around to 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, you see apostolic authority in action, and what a disaster it would be if Paul didn't have a team and he wasn't exercising authority, right, keeping the churches in the ministry, in his fold, so he could expand his field or his sphere. Why did you choose, after 2 Timothy, with your next gen guys that are your peers around the world,
yeah,
France and you name it,
about 17 countries in that.
17 countries in that you meet regularly with
every 2 weeks,
to wrestle with the most important issues related to their networks and the next generation, but take them through our tools. Why did you choose, after doing 2 Timothy, why did you choose 2 Corinthians? It fits right in with the discussion we're having here.
Let's rewind a little bit. The whole evangelicals or Pentecostals saying, using the term apostles, and is there apostles today? And the whole maybe dispensation or whatever argument they end up going to, they're fighting the wrong fight. Yeah. It's the same thing that happened in the 90s with egalitarianism and complementarianism. You saw all these two camps. Everybody would write a whole bunch of books and have a whole bunch of conferences on either side, but it missed the whole point that women are central to the expansion of the church, and women are key. Women are at for a lot of different reasons. So it's in this way, it's the same thing. Your apostolic leaders that are sent out to equip the saints are to bring unity and maturation to networks of churches, keep them rooted in the deposit that Paul was passing on to Timothy and saying, do the work, complete the work. And so I think that's, but what's your question? Your question specifically to me was 2 Corinthians, right?
Yeah, why did you choose that? But also, why is the impact there of you went 2 Timothy first? All the stuff you could have dived into. Should have had an education. Why did you choose 2 Timothy first once these became available, and then 2 Corinthians? And you kind of answered the first one.
Because it's a direct hit to what we want to do with a global complex apostolic team. We want to build a team that looks like Romans 16. We want to build a team that looks like 1 Corinthians 16, where he lists all the names. He's listing the names because he's directing network traffic. Mm-hmm. That's what he's doing. He's not just a list of names where he's saying hello. He is giving instructions. He's telling people, go here, get along there, pick up this, pick up that. He does the same thing in the letters to Timothy. He's directing network traffic. And the reason 2 Timothy is clear, like you said. But 2 Corinthians is he's defending his authority but here's the interesting part that would just blows away each argument that's out there and tells you it's the wrong questions that are being asked about apostolic authority. And that is that his authority comes out of the power of the gospel. That's what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. And that authority, and that, of course, what it is his intention of 1 and 2 Corinthians, to establish them in that gospel. And so his authority is coming out of, and then he, from 2 Corinthians 2 through 7:5, he's defending his authority, and he's saying that it's not a job, it's a calling, it's a stewardship that's given, and then you have conflicts. He says conflicts without and fears within. You have conflicts on the outside of you. You have fears on the inside of what's happening. And so it's a constant struggle of moving up these, shall we call it, paradigm curves, these sets of patterns that you're trying to get people to put on a new life. And so what we need to do is, as leaders who are sent out, which is simply apostolic leaders sent out around the world, we need to have that stewardship, that calling, that work, that discipline he talks about discipline as a soldier, work hard as a farmer, and the third one, which I just forgot.
Athlete.
Yeah. Train like an athlete, discipline as a soldier, work hard like a farmer. And so those two books are...
Well, it's interesting that you went into the fact that network like Acts, patterned after Romans 16, 1 Corinthians 16, but carrying Paul's authority the clearest you can see there. But part of that then was to enable him, to enable us, because of what we call the traditioning of Paul, to use what he did, to use the content of his letters to establish the church, but use what he did to build complex apostolic network. And to do the right kind of assessment. So explain, we build an assessment guide that goes with teaching, mastering the scriptures, because these tools are supposed to give us the great capacity to assess both how well the churches are getting established and what our team is like.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, somehow this whole thing got turned around. I'm supposed to be interviewing you, and now you're asking me questions. Okay.
But we established the need for me to be doing that right at the beginning of the time when you forgot the whole weekend.
Yeah, I could tell what you were going to say. When you looked down, I could just tell your whole body language told me that what way you were going to go. Now, back to the issue at hand. The Mastering the Scriptures, that complex assessment guide, complex apostolic assessment guide, is built on it. My goodness, it's an integration of all the author's intent and literary design of all the letters. And so it gives you I don't want to say a check. I mean, it's not a checklist, but it is
assessment framework.
It's an assessment framework, because I guess I get a little gun shy of saying checklist, because it is, but it's not a checklist because it's not a science. It's not a science. What you're doing is you are using the literary design of what Paul laid out for how to equip and how to establish and expand the church like Acts, patterned after Acts. That's what you're doing, using all the letters, but you're using his intention statements, his words in a sense, his design of the letters of his situation. And so we've only had that for 6 months, something like this, in our hands. And so my couple trips that I've been on and been talking with the networks, I've been using that, coming back, looking at how established are we firmly established in the gospel teachings itself, in the gospel. The second step was in Galatians First and Second Thessalonians is truly about being having firm convictions in that gospel. So a lot of those tools are just so helpful to get at the actual work that leaders are to be doing with complex networks. We're not consultants. And I think I think so many people out there in parachurches they're just consulting. They're there to do a seminar. They're there just to talk for a day, and those things can have their value, but it's very different than the mother and father type ownership and responsibility that Paul and his team took on.
Well, and this assessment guide that you're talking about is very extensive. It also includes the Gospels and will include the Petrine and Johannine as they're finished, but the heart of it is around Paul, because Paul uses that concept of the apostolic tradition, and that the traditioning process he expects us to be doing, out of that Pauline framework according to Jesus' design for the church. So it's kind of like, and so then you started putting it in action right away. But so again, for our listeners, for our audience, that just like there's a teaching the first principles and they're teaching the story, there's a teaching and mastering the scriptures, and then this assessment guide, that grows out of it, because we're serious about these being tools, not only that are built into this new encyclopedia and so on, but these are tools used just like taking us back through the experience. So they're tools to build networks of churches, just like Acts, and to build teams that are going to be able to do the job like Paul and his team did. And so it's actually creating a recovery almost of some of that teaching, and then a cutting edge tool in your hands to know. So I think when you come back after this most recent trip you're on and said you weren't lacking confidence, but come back and say there's just so much confidence, is because we have these things in our hands in a way that are transferable, that they required the person before. Yeah. Anyway, we're belaboring that, but
we are. But I must say it's I grew up in a church where you have Sunday school and you learn the little Bible stories, and you get the little pictures that accompany it, and we talked about the fragmentation of much of that, but I remember studying the book of Acts when I don't know how old I was, 8, 9 years old, pretty young. And I remember thinking, boy, wouldn't it be great if you lived during that time? Or I remember reading, what is it, the last chapter of Luke, and thinking on the road to Emmaus, like, wouldn't it be great if you could just have been one of those guys along on the road to Emmaus? Wouldn't that have been? And I'll tell you, I think part of what's happening in our day is you can Acts is still happening today, and that's part of the confidence of when you get back to what the author is actually saying. It takes work, takes effort. You're changing a set of patterns based on where Christendom is today. But once you get there, all of a sudden, everything makes sense. Yeah, and it's not a narrowing; it's a wide. All of a sudden, everything, the world makes sense of why things are happening, it makes sense of why we get denominations, why we get rule-based, and why we actually should be going the other way as Christians.
Well, and also it's really critical, I think, to recognize that the times we're in the whole set of our resources and the paradigm and everything churches need everywhere because it's Christ designed, but in the decline of the West and the institutionalization, it's almost impossible to renew. But here, all the way across the global South, we now have these large-scale movements that look like Acts in their origin, but aren't carefully patterned after Acts, aren't carefully traditioned. And I think that, again, to seal down this, the importance of the mastering the scriptures is the guys who have been around us for a long time that have lots of, that literally tens of thousands in many cases, 45,000 with the Ugandan group. They've got the task of, they're not in Western traditional denominations. And so they started like Acts and look like Acts, but they haven't patterned after Acts. And so that now they're holding those things and they know what they got.
If this generation doesn't get patterned after Acts, then they head the wrong way.
Yeah, and then they'll
that's
be
the challenge. Then they
and actually, that's the lead in to the next thing I think on here.
Yeah, it is. We should move on to that. Is the paper called the Gatherings as Church.
Yeah,
we got 2 things left.
But patterned after Acts, and so actually that's an introduction to your global dialogues because we're talking about the mastering the scriptures, helping them. They weren't patterned after Acts, helping them now to build more fully, even because they started like Acts, and your dialogue, your global dialogues are another tool in that.
Another tool, and all of them are named whatever their first part of their name is with the subtitle of Patterned After Acts as the secondary title. So we presented a paper called Gatherings as Church, Patterned After Acts. So what do we want to say? We've got that one, and then the one more session that we need to talk about.
Well, it depends on whether we want to talk about the event that got everybody off their phones and had a full
attention. Well, now that you brought it up, I mean, how are you going to not talk about it then?
Well, that's up to you in terms of...
Well... So we presented this paper called Gatherings as Church, and it really was built on top of Going to Church in the First Century, the book by Robert Banks. Beautiful, wonderful book we've been using for years, built on a bunch of research, but such a simple book, tells story form, narrative form about going to church, literally in the first century.
Like 1 Corinthians 11:14 to...
11:17, 14:40.
14,
right.
yeah.
Okay, so... But then the other thing is it's built on top also of the Gathering, the encyclical, The Gathering, which is the 9th encyclical, which talks about assemblies and some of the history, the background, Greco-Roman research is in there. It talks about the gathering, the church gathering itself. And so this is more about the processes and practices and more what it looks like and our leadership structure all around it. Because there's more than just the actual gathering itself. You have to actually have leaders that are equipped and trained. You have to have a network. And so it goes into that whole thing. So after we presented that as a tool called Global Dialogue Paper, afterwards we had probably an hour-long dialogue with everybody in the audience, wide open, live, and it got heated. And we had our 3rd generation people there, and which are people for us, we call them 3rd gen, which means they're born 1995 to 2015. They could be born in that time frame. And we've been putting intentional effort in that. But they came, and boy, Jeff, that's all they can talk about is that hour after that paper. They just, these are teenage guys and girls, and they were just so entertained and loved that time together. So that's the context. Now, specifically, what do we want to say about it?
sometimes I get a little wired, emotional, when we're going over and over
passionate.
stuff. Passionate.
We both get passionate,
and we both did get passionate.
We both got very passionate, and they got
But yours was only at a 6. Mine was an 8. I think at
on
this
a scale of 1 to 10.
On a scale of 1 to 10.
So I never put it on the scale. I was at a 6. Yeah, that's probably fair. I was above the middle. That's fair.
Well, and the
You
reason
were
why
towards the top.
The reason why we're passionate about this is that if you're not willing to deal with 1 Corinthians 11:17 to 14:40, and the fact that the gathering design that Jesus has for a meal, the elements, the bread and the cup at the end of the meal, and an open time of which we call a symposium back at that time, but an open time of sharing,
of discussion.
But we're going to hang on to the Western institutional service that really is revised Catholic, because all the way back to the monks, 4th century monks, where they began making this a Stoic experience, and then eventually pulling the meal out, and we're left with this Eucharist that is this little bitty moment experience that's supposed to be the pinnacle of worship, but yet we hang on to the structures just like Mass in our Sunday morning church services. Then we are unwilling to break that apart. You can't get back to Christ's design for the church, But so to hear those guys, some of the guys saying, this Holy Communion, this meal is common and it's going to wreck Holy Communion, and the defense of that again just kind of set me off, because I said something like, at least they told me I said something like, that's garbage. But anyway, the frank speech at an elevated level, and that's what it was, the frank speech at an elevated level, I bet hardly anybody had seen that before, but the appreciation level all the way from our top leaders to the young men that you were talking about it was a very constructive thing, but very stark event, stark something.
Well, it was the passion that is in the passion that was out there. First of all, was amongst everybody. I mean, you talked about their phones or internet traffic. We got to explain that a little bit too. When the discussion began to ensue after the paper about what does this mean? What does this mean for Holy Communion? And what are all the implications? There was zero internet traffic. And part of the point we were trying to make in the which we try to make in the paper, is that discussions where people can work out what they're thinking, and where people are surrounded by the word, surrounded by seeking the truth, by seeking the author's intent with a skillful leader, is part of the process of everyone growing in their faith. But they have to have opportunity, they have to have space, they have to have a setting in a situation in which they can dialogue. And that's what you see throughout the New Testament. And as we're articulating that, there's fight against that, but yet everyone is holistically engaged based off the internet traffic that I was shown afterwards, after the fact, the next day that says. So I think it's a little ironic, or comical, at least at minimum, just that the very dialogue that we're trying to pull out of, that we don't want into our settings, because we already have our religious system of events set up every Sunday morning. The very dialogue we're wanting in order for everyone to be fully engaged, everyone was fully engaged in that dialogue, debating that. So, but that's kind of a secondary point anyway. The whole passion around hundreds of leaders dialoguing about it trying to seek clarity on it was a highlight of the time. It truly was a highlight of the time. And I think, it upsets so many things and so many traditions, but yet it's such a key part of what Jesus and his leaders and his apostles were really setting out to do.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun, and their young guys are just, all they can do is still, there was like 5 or 6 of them, or even more than that, just standing up recording with their phones, just recording the time. It was quite the time. Okay, then we gotta finish up here, Jeff. We talked about the Master Craftsman system. We have a new global Mastercraft. It's not new. It's new in a sense of implementation. It's not new in the sense of, like Walter Kaiser, this is from the 70s. But Master Craftsman apprenticeships and portfolios. So we have a MAP, Global Master Craftsman System, for developing all leaders, all people, no matter their station in life, with an integrated theological encyclopedia. We have an online tool for it. You delivered a white paper. This was actually the paper that you had, a white paper called Master Craftsman Apprenticeships and Portfolios. What did we learn? What did we gain? What did our people learn?
Yeah, again,
what did the network learn?
You're right. We've been at this for a little while. Maybe the people that are observing could have intermission and get some popcorn or something, and then come back for the last half. But
I think you're saying that because you want to stop and get some popcorn.
That's right. That's right. But there's a story here, and we got to get at least some of the story of this out, so that it's a lot of it's embedded in the paper, but it's just an incredible title concept. Every time I look at it, I'm encouraged from it. And there's a whole story and a whole journey behind it. But you and I are in those 5 days, and we're working through all this stuff, or 5 weeks, that we described in the very beginning. We're trying to get all these things converged, and then for the conference in a new almost era of the next 30 years. And so you come in, and we're doing whiteboard sessions, every day, just you and I, interacting sometimes with the senior elders and the apostolic team on the other side but you come in and you say, I got this idea. We need to call the center, we need to call this whole thing that we're doing MAP. And you said, I went all the way back to the original apprenticeship program that I was in 1972, started, ministry apprenticeship program, MAP. Mm-hmm. He said, but we need to grab those roots and the concepts and all that we've developed, but we need a fresh name on it. And you came up with MAP, Master Craftsman Apprenticeships Portfolios. Mm-hmm. And then renamed the center, which you went all the way back to my work on the Center for CBTE.
Mm-hmm. That's from the 80s and 90s.
And that was 1995 that it was officially written as a full piece.
You got a bunch of pieces before that I was reading.
Yeah.
You got a stack of stuff this high.
Oh, yeah. And actually all the way up to 2004 or 5, whatever it was, that we started the D-Min, where Kaiser renamed the D-Min, not just center, or not just church-based theological education, but global church-based theological education. So you reached back into that and now made the Global Center for Master Craftsmen, and the acronym MAP, Master Craftsman Apprenticeships Portfolios. And when I look at that, we got degrees under it. You went back to the orange sheet and resurrected type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which we now call, instead of leadership mastery 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's Master Craftsman 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I look at that taxonomy, I look at the framework, and it's part of our history, but it illustrates perfectly the fact that this is a framework, it's a schema. We've got degrees under it, we got certificates under it at the different levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and everything, but it's all there. And so then the paper is designed to show the history of that development over the years, to show how it's converged, what the Center for Master Craftsmen is, the Global Center for Master Craftsmen is now, and how this framework drives everything and puts us all at the foundation of a portfolio, even every individual, having a portfolio. And so then to review how it all fits, the portfolios, the apprenticeships, the key resources, the pathways, so you can take many pathways. So the paper puts all that together, but I just think that when you stand back, I think I got the same reaction from these international guys that have big networks that we've worked with for years, that, man, this just pictures it. We can do this. And so there's the contribution of the paper was helpful because of the history, and then I finished it, with the next 30 and built off of the paradigm papers, showing the pathway to redo theological education and missions. So it gives a clear snapshot of all our resources and how they fit into this. But I think the biggest thing in it is that it summarizes our work together for 5 years, 4 years. You've been around for 20, but these 4 years and these 5 weeks and the going after this, I think that it's sort of like the picture's complete. And they got a tremendous advancement of tools. And so that white paper is the first of 5, just like your dialogue papers are growing out of the encyclicals. My white papers grow more out of the paradigm papers. And so we can see the predicted path back then in 92 and how we did it and where we're going. And so I think that it kind of provided a final piece of the integration of these 3 days, and let alone of our work, but what we're launching into the next 30.
It's exciting. It's exciting to I just felt an excitement at the end of we know where we're headed.
Yeah.
It's like you can see another piece of the paradigm curve that we need to go up. So.
And then it capped off with our celebration.
We had a big banquet feast together. Families sitting at tables, served by our 4th generation. Everything created by our churches. All the food created by our churches. Huge meal. Served by our 4th generation. So those born after 2015. Some was before 2015, but.
And we have a balcony in our main auditorium. For those of you that have been there, you know what I'm talking about. It's and all across the back were lined up our smallest children through our teens that were serving, all dressed in white.
Yep.
And well organized, well trained and coached in terms of serving. And ZQ, who joined us, he's a Chinese leader, well-known theologian from the U.S., from Columbia University, said afterwards, he said, that was actually the best steak I've ever had. Because we got some of our second gen guys with their cooking skills grilling outside, steak, and the family serving it. So it was pretty cool.
And then to end with, we had, out of our churches, we've created a lot of different songs. And out of those churches, then the team works with the creative musicians and the artists, and the apostolic team works with them, the elders work with them, the churches work. It's a whole dialogue. Dialogue is central in our communities to interpret your own life and interpret your work. And so we had 5 songs or so. I think we played maybe 3 of them in the evening, but we ended with this Body Alive, which carried a lot of the the author's intentions from the Mastering the Scriptures that we just got done.
Yeah, and there's let's just tell a little bit of the story of that too. That several of our people have produced songs that are in what I call in the paradigm, and what I mean by that is they're carefully constructed lyrics around the paradigm. And Gabe, who leads our creation of these kinds of songs and tools, created 5 songs, and you lined it up. So, here's our YouTube. You'll be able to see this kind of podcast. You'll be able to see the conference because YouTube put it up the second we were done, and then we got his 5 songs. And like I said, others have done them, but 2 years ago, Sam and I grabbed Gabe and pulled him into our church and said, Gabe, you've got the talent. We got to have somebody that really gets the paradigm. So I fed him a bunch of stuff, hard stuff to read, because he was a worship pastor out in the West Coast before they came here. And he had most of the paradigm then. But I fed him that stuff where the symposium and the meal and some of the harder stuff, and he really digested it and put it out into a paper. But then we challenged him to write a small body of work, a small body of songs. And he went after them. He brought the lyrics and had us debate them in our house church. And gradually he put together 5 of them. There's kind of a body of work. And the way you constructed it, to have him have a position like that and sing them all, illustrates the fact, because artists, when they produce the music, and if they produce the words, they don't want anybody messing with the words. But the problem is, you got to think very carefully to move the paradigm pieces, like the meal, for example, forward into music in a way that is accurate.
Well, it's a teaching tool. It's a teaching tool. Your teaching tool.
That's the part of Colossians 3 and Ephesians 5. Yeah.
Ephesians 5, sing psalms.
It's a very important teaching
spiritual
tool.
Songs to one another.
Not only is he talented, but he's humble and allowed us to interact with it. And from a theological standpoint, those are 5 perfect songs. Mm-hmm. There's not anything in those songs that doesn't enhance an unique understanding of the paradigm. And I'm excited about that too, because now everybody else was excited. The internationals were excited. Not only are they going to teach them, but the vision that they got to be producing out of their culture, some songs, which is part of our global family and global unity.
Yep.
And so I think the way you positioned him in there was the right time to do that.
Yeah.
And had huge impact.
It was a momentous time.
And then your final challenge.
Yep, final challenge of...
And you and I did a stand-up. See, we sit like this normally, but we wanted it to be fairly quick, so you wanted us to stand. And so we stood up and started out our normal way, as only now we were stand-up comics. But again, people so much more appreciated my humor over years. But it'll.
I know we'd get towards the end here, and you just wouldn't be able to help yourself and put a few remarks in about how you're a better comic than I am. But when you're both in the bottom 10%, I'm not sure arguing about it is going to help either one of us cause. But
that's right.
If you want to be at the top of the pile of the bottom 10%, I probably still won't let you. I'll still argue with you because I'm a competitive soul and I want to win. So my jokes were better. That's all I got. But
then when I sat down and which we planned, and you did the final challenge, it was perfect. It was not heavy, but an appropriate way to say God's done some things here. And the only thing we didn't talk about all along was just a little added piece here on Anton. Anton is key leader in Ukraine, for those of you that don't know and are listening. And he was able to get out of the country and out of the war, and been a great partner, building a solid church and ultimately a network of 1,000 churches in Ukraine, 100 at the core. And 2 years ago, he went through the story with some of the key leaders there. And that was transformational for them because they made a shift from being Ukrainian national identity as the center of everything to Christ's design and his plan. But somehow getting out this time, and what he shared Sunday morning,
we interviewed him here. He's gonna be an interview.
Oh, so that's available. When he said, you just, in the midst of this, you got to keep the kerygma, you got to keep the gospel in front of you and move ahead. But your interview with him at the beginning, him having his presence throughout the time, we laid hands on him twice.
We had 8 different countries lay hands on him and pray for him, of leaders across the world.
It just produced a sobriety, not sobriety. It produced it just added to the significance of what we've been doing this week and a half.
Yeah, sobriety or seriousness, but not even that. Just a depth, a real life and death type feeling to the whole thing.
And fitting in with the diaspora that we're teaching by going through Peter's associates letters, and the fact that they're all diaspora and they're in difficult situations, and that's what they're probably moving into in Ukraine besides the war, moving into that. And it just spread across the whole time. And so it was really, really great. And we didn't plan all that. It just popped up at the right time. Our elders laying hands on him after that first Sunday, and then all the leaders coming up, at the end, and built some real unity too.
Yeah. It was an impactful time. And now on the other side, we go and travel to all these places and encourage them, equip the saints for works of service until we all attain unity and maturation of the faith, presenting them mature before Christ. So to that end, we lift our glasses. My glass is empty, so I don't know how I can lift it. So I'll lift yours. You're supposed to cheers with me didn't you get the hint when I said we lift our glasses? You're supposed to lift your glass.
Yeah, you can't take yours even though it's empty and set it aside when they match, and then offer a coffee cup. There we go.
What are we toasting to again?
I have no idea why we're finishing this way.
Okay.